Hey, I'm Alexa Fisher. Welcome. I'm the creator of Wish Beads, author of the book Wish Work, and you are listening or watching the Wish Beads podcast. Today on the podcast, I have an incredible woman, a dear friend of mine. Her name is Vanessa Till Hooper. She is the founder of Studio HHH, which is a multidisciplinary art and architecture design studio, which is simply phenomenal. In fact, I'm going to give you a quick teaser. We're going to be showing a reel of her studio's work at the end of the podcast. So you'll definitely want to check that out, as well as check out her work directly on her website at studiohhh.com. Anyway, I've known Vanessa for a very long time. She went to graduate school at SciArc, which is the Southern California Institute of Architecture, with my husband. And so I've known her for a long time. I have watched her blossom as an artist and a businesswoman. I have long admired her work. And the reason why I'm so tickled to introduce her to you today is because she is also collaborating with me on a very, very big wish of mine. We have been working together for the past, my goodness, it might be almost a year, developing what will literally be the next chapter of my professional life and bringing the art of wishing to the world in a much bigger way. So I wanted to bring you along behind the scenes, specifically talking about creativity. And I am looking at the world right now, as you are, and experiencing a lot of turmoil and experiencing a lot of division and experiencing a lot of heartache. And because the world feels like things are changing and change can feel very uncomfortable. And for me, one of the solutions to navigate times of turmoil and challenge is creativity and imagination and community and conversations. And what I have found in my creative process with Vanessa is a real lifeline in this time where it's a real head scratcher. And so while we share with you a little bit of our own creative process and just sort of our thoughts about creativity, I invite you to think about the ways in which this, even if you're not in the quote unquote creative disciplines, like let's say you literally are like, well, I'm not an entrepreneur, Alexa, or a designer, or whatever. Life is creative. There's no aspect of life that doesn't involve finding a creative solution or a creative way to approach something, whether it's a health challenge, whether it is family dynamics or politics or anything. So keep that in mind as you listen and as you watch, is that where could this apply in your life? Where can you take a few little insights and weave them into your life as a source of inspiration? Because of course, that's why I do this podcast. That's why I create these things, is really to have an impact in your life. So without further ado, I am inviting you to learn more about Vanessa. She's absolutely a force and I adore her, and you'll learn about her work. And I really appreciate you watching. Just a quick reminder, if you're not subscribed to the podcast, please do so, or subscribe to our channel on YouTube. And I'm so bad at asking for this, but I'm getting better. Leave us a review. Leave me a review. Apparently these things matter. So I would love it if you would take a moment to write a review, share the podcast with a friend, explore our old episodes. Because truthfully, this podcast is here for you to get a behind the scenes look into the magical world of wishing. And so you may find the tools to invite that magic into your own life. That's why I do what I do. So without further ado, this is Vanessa. Vanessa, I am so happy to be, I talk to you all the time, but I'm excited to pull back the curtain a little bit and talk about creativity with you and goals and big dreams, because I think that I'm feeling, I don't know about you, but at the beginning of the year, this year, this time of year always feels like, let's identify our goals and go, go, go. And boy, oh boy, I think there's a different way to approach this. So thank you and welcome to the Wish Beats podcast.
Thank you for having me, Alexa. It's great to be here. And yes, we do chat all the time, but it's so fun to think about chatting about a really specific subject. And it's gotten my wheels turning too. So, yeah,
Fantastic.
thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So I did share a little bit about Vanessa and especially the relationship that she and I have in regards to my big wish. But what's also really exciting to me is that we're both coming at creativity in different ways in our work. And I really believe, let me just say this. I believe everybody is creative. There's no such thing as like, oh, I have a
Absolutely.
creative job because I'm an artistic director and therefore I'm
Absolutely.
creative. Like creativity is a part of life. So when you think about creativity, Vanessa, what like how would you define that for yourself?
I'm in the flow and ideas come easily. I'm excited about possibility. And I'm kind of seeing the connectivity between things. When I am in a creative mindset, I'm remembering that conversation that I had and I'm connecting it to the magazine article that I read. And I'm like seeing the dots align. And for me, that's creative space.
Oh, I love that. And I'll tell you, for my creative process, those I'm someone who more like gets a flash, like gets a
Mm,
moment. And I think that's probably why for wishing, for me, I'm inviting people to see almost a movie of their life in which everything, like in which a scenario is playing out, because that typically is those flashes of insight or those downloads or those moments come to me. And yet, I find that where the rubber meets the road, or when you can actually materialize those ideas, is when you have that connective tissue, when you can step back and allow, you kind of capture those moments. And when I say capture those moments, for me, it has to be about writing it down because
mm.
I always, every day, will have a moment, especially in the shower, which we'll talk about, that when I have a moment, I have to write it down because like a dream, I forget it.
Yeah.
But when you give yourself the time to then say, okay, let's capture the moment, let's capture the ideas, let's jot it down, and then step back or give it time, let it simmer, and then see if you can connect the dots.
Yeah.
Like what message is here, almost like you're trying to break a code
Mm,
and allow something to come into view.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's what's been so amazing about working with you on our big idea. So let's just take a moment. And this is not our opportunity where we're going to necessarily share our big idea. But one thing I do want to talk about is the beginning.
Okay.
So let's talk about the beginning. So if you've been following me and Wish Beads and my newsletter, you may have heard me talk about the vision I have to have over 1 million people wishing at once. This idea that we could collectively get so many people together that there's an energy and a momentum where people are anchored in hope and positivity. So, do you remember me, Vanessa, talking about this?
I do. I do. I remember the cold call or whatever it was. I think you said, let's have a chat. And we jumped on Zoom together and you said, check this out. I have this idea. And you kind of ran through that with me. And it was really exciting to think about, the broad range of possibility of what that could look like.
Yeah. Okay, but let's be even more honest because like
Okay.
you're right, it's exciting. But I think there is something here and I'm not going to get upset. But but also in that call, were there other feelings that came up, whether it was kind of like I'm not so sure about this idea or this sounds like wishful thinking or how on earth or like really because I think
Yeah.
this is
I mean, I would say that um, like I see what you're getting at. And I would
Mhm.
say 10 years ago, I would have had a lot more of those feelings. And
Ah,
having gone through the process of having a design practice where I'm looking at how to kind of break down big ideas into manageable steps all the time, I think that idea struck me as like, okay, um, you know, it's unformed, right? It's this kind
Correct.
of unformed grand idea that, you know, you kind of could take all of these different directions. And I think at that moment I was feeling a little like, okay, that's like 10 years of time of like focused attention, or at least 2 full-time years. Like, you know, that's a lot. And I think
Yeah.
I definitely was feeling like that's a lot. Alexa, do you know how a lot that is?
Right. So when one has a big idea, you have to think about, who are you going to share this idea with, and
Yeah.
for what purpose? Because sometimes if you get an idea and you're enthusiastic about it, um, you know, you can be met with a lot of naysayers, those
Yeah.
famous naysayers who are trying to save you from yourself. Don't
Right.
waste your time, don't waste your energy. These are all the reasons why this is unrealistic. It's not going to happen. Now, the leap of faith that I took many years ago when I had that idea, that download, was
Mm,
I believe in the power of sharing your idea, not necessarily saying, "Oh, I'm going to do this now," but I believe in the power of just keeping it top of mind, top of
yeah.
mind. It has a
Yeah.
certain momentum. But the reason why I reached out to you in that kind of cold call kind of way, which was, I've watched you build this unbelievable design studio, which I want you to talk about. And I've watched you put beautiful ideas actually into the world. And
Mm,
I knew there was a skill set that was going to be imperative for me to take this seed of an idea and really do it, because there was so much I didn't know and I
right.
still don't know. And
Right.
so there was this jump. But one thing I respect about you so much is that you did not give me from the beginning this lip service of like, "That's amazing. We could
Mm,
totally do this." What you did was you created a space, like a safe space for possibility, without artificially jumping in and overly committing. You didn't
mm,
commit. You said,
no.
"This sounds really interesting to talk about, and I'm willing to talk about it with you on a very consistent basis to see if there's something here." And that to me was the first revolutionary step.
Mm,
It was a revolutionary step because it was a commitment. And for sure, we committed, just on a very practical way, friends listening and watching, to talk every Friday. And what a huge commitment. You know, I
and
know
I will
you're
say, I want to add to that and say that it was a commitment to talk every Friday, not for 20 minutes. We
right,
put a 2 hour block in
right,
because we didn't know where those conversations were going to go. And I think that that was also, at the time, felt like a lot of time that we were
right,
dedicating, you know, like a two
right.
hour window in, you know, two busy schedules is a lot of time. And we knew that it was going to take journeying through the conversation. And so we put a big block of time every week, and we did commit to that time. Um, so yeah,
And we
just
had,
wanted to add that.
yeah, and we had messy, open-ended conversations.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about that.
Yeah.
I really want to talk about that because that was the first thing that, number one, I so respected that there was some form of yes in your answer. I think
Mhm.
intuitively I knew that there was such a good combination of talents here,
Right.
and also just, you know, friendship, and it just all the right things. And that there wasn't an ego part of me that was like, "What, you're not all in from the beginning? Well, forget it." Like, you really were like, "I'm not committed to say yes to this because I know what this is going to take,
Yeah.
and I'm not there, but I am going to commit." Like, you had a very healthy boundary. And I
Mm,
appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that you made the sacrifice of your time, that you were interested enough to give it some time. So, so thinking about that as it relates to maybe your life, those listening and watching, like, we have been so ingrained to have this instant gratification culture that we
right.
often cut our own possibilities because we just don't put in the time.
Right.
We just think like, "Oh, this didn't work for me once." Or, "I tried
Yeah.
that workout and it didn't work once." Or, "I tried to eat this certain way for a week and it didn't work."
Yeah.
And we've lost the sense of commitment and patience and curiosity and open-endedness and
Yeah.
exploration and play. And I think that we do ourselves a great disservice
Mm,
because we stop ourselves before the real work even begins.
right. Yeah. I think that for me, design is a process. And all big ideas are big and beautiful, but are not real until they go through the process of development. And for me, that's where the exciting stuff happens, is the refining and nuancing of it. And I think that that's, partly comes, my architectural background comes into play there, and the training of how you go about the design process from an architectural standpoint is really different than designing in a lot of other fields. And I think that that has certainly influenced kind of how I approach the goal of creating.
So I've done an introduction to your studio, but can you talk a little bit more, because I know you'll talk more eloquently than I did, about the work that you do at your studio, how that came about? Because I think that it is one of those unique, like it's a very unique business, and that it is that intersection of art and architecture, but has given you this unbelievable creative process that that I think people can really learn from.
Hope I can describe it better than you, but I'm not sure, Alexa. I'm so in it.
Yeah. And by the way, everybody, you'll get links to, her studio. And we're at the end of this. If you're watching on YouTube, you will actually see an entire beautiful video snapshot of all the things that not all the things, but a lot of amazing, gorgeous projects that they've done. So you'll get to see that.
Thanks, Alexa.
Yes.
So, the studio that I have now, we have been Studio HHH for 4 years. And, I started out really, having trained as an architect and having worked in a design studio, and then had the opportunity to kind of step out and create my own studio, and had a number of clients, but was really conscious at that moment that I really wanted to be doing the work that I personally felt was important. And so I was, I think, really fortunate enough to have the space and the kind of, the breathing room at that moment, where I wasn't just terrified about how am I possibly going to make this happen, but I was able to step back and say, how can I make this happen in a way that is actually really right for me and really reflects what, I want to be bringing into the world. And so I made the intention at that time to take on projects that for me had a kind of through line of what we were interested in doing. And also an openness of discovery, so that it wasn't limited to like, we're going to be doing only large scale art installations, or we're going to be doing graphic design. We approached it as a multidisciplinary design studio because, the way that, that my creative process works isn't really limited to that, right? It's,
Correct. Yeah.
I think that as you were saying for you, Alexa, that it's, it's about a process, not about a product. And, in that way, it's, it can be applied, that a sensibility or a process can be applied really to anything. And so it was important to me to keep it broad. So the work that we do is, sometimes it's branding and placemaking. Sometimes it's a large scale art installation and an object, or, a creation that people are call art. And sometimes it's experiential design, and on occasion it's even interior design. So we move through a lot of different kinds of projects through the course of a single year, which, is challenging because there's sort of, never a formula that you can repeat. But also exciting because every time I sit down at my desk, it's a new design process.
Right. So all those, neurons are firing in your brain because it's like, oh, good, a challenge,
Yeah.
But one thing
Lots
I'll
of
say,
challenges.
yeah. And one thing I'll say especially when you see, your reel of some of the highlights of your work, to me, the word that comes to mind is awe. And that idea of awe is the impact that someone has walking into a space and they see these light sculptures, or they see these interactive walls, or they see somehow a space transformed through light and design, and that it takes you out of the everyday,
Yeah.
that there's some visceral shift that happens with perception because they are engaging in the work
Yeah.
that you're putting. You're getting people to think and wake
Yeah.
up and open their minds to something. And to me, the more that I watched your work evolve and the ways in which I just saw you creatively expand and do bigger and more dynamic projects, I think for me, that was just, well, one, as a friend, I was just so proud of you and excited for you and all of that. But I also saw, wow, here is a new level of placemaking, a new
Right.
level of getting people to connect with the world in a different
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
And to me, I think that that was the thing that whenever that idea came in my head to say, I wonder if Vanessa and her studio would be open to this big
Yeah.
idea, because there is so much that I don't know.
Mm,
And I need to find someone to play in the sandbox with me.
right.
And
Right.
that is such an interesting spot, because I think another myth that I'd like to touch on is this idea that we have to do everything by ourselves,
Mm,
or that someone's going to take our idea, or
right.
I don't know, just
Right.
all of
Okay.
those sort of, yeah, let's talk about
Lots
that.
to respond to on that, Alexa. I love all of that. I think that, when you were using the word engage, that's certainly at the heart of most of the projects that we, endeavor to create, is that, we really look at where are the opportunities to engage and inspire. And it's about creating moments where people feel like the impossible is possible, and they feel like yeah, that inspiration and awe, that something is like, can be just wildly different than they thought it was, right?
Yeah.
So those moments that, and part of that process is really for us about shifting the kind of end result of something. The way that we measure the success of a project is, it takes it sort of shifts the pivot point out of it being an object, a perfect, beautiful thing,
Right.
and really puts it into the viewer, so that the
Mm.
success of the project really rests in the viewer and in that experience that the person is having, opposed to it being, as a finished end result. So, we look strongly at process,
Mm.
and, how engaging and interesting is that process of getting there. That's a measure of success for us. And also, how does it impact people? And of course, you don't really know how it impacts people. You don't, you
That's
never
that
really know.
non-attachment piece.
You
Isn't that
can't,
the
you
isn't
can't
that the
know.
rub?
Yeah, you can't know how it impacts people, but that's the goal, is to really have the end, the success measured by the people that it touches, and who feel like a sense that they live in a fun and engaging place, or that, they're just like you say, the words that you use so often, Alexa. It's just like, it's endless possibility. And if the teenagers or the kids or the adults or whoever who approach these pieces and have that feeling a little bit, like, we've done our job well. And I
It
also want to
was
touch on
so,
one more thing you
oh
said,
yeah, yeah,
which
please.
was about teams. And it's I think also really important to remember, and it helps me to remember this. And I am able to be a little bit detached from the perfection of a creation when I think about it this way. Every project that we take on, the end result of that project is evidence of process, the amount of time that we could give to it, the budgetary constraints of that project, and the people who are involved. So the people who are involved are the client and the whole client team. There are the fabricators, there our creative team, there, whoever was involved in this constellation, they all have a hand in the result of that execution. And that when I see finished projects that we've created, I see them as kind of a snapshot of all of those things coming together like a constellation of things at that moment. And through that process, you do your absolute best to bring in the highest level, thinking and connectivity and refinement that's possible, but it's also what is possible. And I
Right.
think that that is always with me of, it's, you don't need to make something that's, that's outside of the circumstances you're in.
Or
It's all about,
disappointed that you can't, oh, if we
yeah,
only had more money, or if we only had
right.
more time. You
Yeah.
absolutely, no matter what, whatever idea, wild, big thinking idea, you always hold a place and a space for like, maybe, yeah, let's see. As opposed to like, Alexa, totally unrealistic. No, no, no. You know what I mean? You are so the opposite person.
But I think
it's
it comes from also that thinking of, it's, the result may be something very simple.
right.
And it may, it's like you're always looking for creative connectivity, but at the same time, it's, we live in this world of complexity.
Mm.
And the idea that you have in your head, the single idea of your brainstorm moment, we all have them, is not, is never going to be able to be realized in the real world. It's never going to be that perfect shiny object that's in
Right.
your head,
Right.
because it's the way that we execute anything is with a lot of people working together. Even if you're an artist working in your studio, you have specific materials that were touched by other people. You have the constraints of time, you have the constraints of weather or light or whatever those things are that all influence it. And I think that it's really important to keep that in mind as part of the creative process, that it is a coming together of things, a coming together of people and ideas and time and moments, and all of those come together to create something that then gets put out into the world for people to experience.
All right. So, of course, there's a million things I love about you, but I want to highlight the fact that your emphasis is on collaboration.
Mm.
Because as we stand here in this time, the dominant narrative right now is division that I'm noticing,
Mm.
and people being like, that's my opinion, this is my
Right.
truth. And when you allow a creative process to lead with the idea that it's a collaboration and that everybody brings a gift, let me tell you, I mean, in the world of Los Angeles, even if I looked in the world of entertainment, a lot of things happen through collaboration, but there's also the opposite energy of massive, massive ego. And
Right.
the idea of like, it's my way or the highway, or some of the biggest designers who they have all these other people doing the work, but it's their name on the product. It's
Right.
their name that's like, this is a such and such, fill in the blank. And in the design world, in the architecture world, and all sorts of things, because that's how society seems to have structured itself. And what you are illuminating here is that really everybody has a seat at this table and is
Mm.
actually an integral part of this constellation. And I even love the idea that you're using the word constellation. And we look up
Mm.
at the night sky, and what makes it beautiful is not because we can only see one moon, and the moon is the star of the show. It's just the moon. It's actually the magnificence of this intergalactic dance and tapestry. And that's what makes the magic of the night sky. Like maybe
Right.
that's a little bit of a
Right.
stretch, but
Yeah,
I really love that you
absolutely.
you lead with that. And that is so, so, so true. The other thing that I want to highlight is go back to your previous point. In my parallel life, through my teaching with confidence and communication coaching, and in my classes, I talk about public speaking, and that most speakers are preoccupied with themselves. Am I
Mm.
nervous? Do I look confident? Do they see that I've got, red coming on my cheeks? Or did I say the right thing? Did I remember all my words? And I said, the first step is switching your attention from yourself, which is self-centered, self-conscious, and making it about the audience
Mm.
and looking at them and being focused on them. Are they receiving your beautiful message? Are
Yeah.
they feeling the feelings? Are they inspired? Are they learning something? It's really at that point, if you do your work, it's always about the audience. And I
Right.
never thought about that as you were talking about the creations that you put into the world and say, it's about the user. And how could I possibly know how they're going to experience that? But this is for them.
Yeah.
And boy, if that doesn't say so much about your emphasis on your own ego, I mean, you have a lot to be, be proud of. And I know you're proud of the work that you do, but it is, again, such a beautiful example of the selfless giving that is embedded in your work.
Thanks,
And
Alexa.
when you walk into a room and someone who is naturally focused on others, they exude confidence, they exude a light, they shine their own light because it's not about them. It's not about them. And that is sort of, again, the myth that I'm always trying to understand about people. Confidence is not about blasting your light so bright that you blind everybody. It's about generously and effortlessly sharing that light so that people can drink it and be, to feel that warmth and the goodness of your light. And that's what changes the energy of a room or an audience or a project or an installation or whatever.
Yeah. Wow.
And
I would say also, I mean, to add to that, for those who may be sort of thinking, scratching their heads going, well, how do you get these gigantic things done if you have this kind of passive attitude about everyone involved? I want to also emphasize that it's important to remember roles. And
amen.
When I'm, sitting at a table with a team of people, I'm acutely aware that my role is of that creative decision maker. And so I will be doing the work to really refine the creative vision and have really clear high standards for achieving those, at the same time of really being totally aware that it will change by all the people involved, and that's part of it. And then it's like this, each project becomes a snapshot of those constraints and those opportunities and those people who came together. And then you're able to just let it go. You don't need to lament it being perfect or imperfect or not reaching enough people or whatever it is. You just let it go and you move on to the next creative process.
Ooh, okay. So let's talk about expansion and constraints. Because I think one of the things that you and I both kind of step back and say, wow, this is so interesting, because I feel like you and I are completely in sync with the discipline it takes to have deadlines and to operate in our own structure. So the structure began with, let's make a commitment to meet every Friday for 2 hours on Zoom. It's a standing meeting. It goes in the calendar. This is what it looks like. Let's give ourselves that commitment. So it wasn't like, hey, let's just talk and let's talk about our creative ideas. I mean, you and I live on different coasts. We have very busy lives. We have, work that we do and family and whatever. So we knew that if we didn't have some structure, it would dissipate like a dream. It would just, we would just 2 years or 3 years would go by and we would never talk about it again.
Yeah.
Right. However, we also somehow magically gave us enough time in that timeline so that we didn't say, okay, well, let's have 4 meetings for 1 month. We're going to meet, and after those 8 hours of talking, we'll have a plan. It actually took 6 months.
It did. It took 6 months.
And then we both went, this is so interesting because we don't have a client. We are our own clients.
Yeah.
We don't yet know what this thing is. And I have never had that kind of collaboration. I am a solopreneur, and while I have an excellent, incredible team, I'm not really creatively deciding courses that I'm going to create or products I'm going to launch or businesses I'm going to launch because I'm in collaboration with someone. It's usually I have an idea and I orchestrate how that's going to happen with the team. I take their opinions, but it's not like I'm collaborating.
Right.
So can you talk about how this experience has been different from a traditional client studio relationship?
Absolutely. So I think that, on a typical project, we may have something like 3 to 5 weeks to develop a concept. And would it be interesting to talk about the steps that the just kind of more from a technical standpoint, the steps of the creative process with a client?
I do, because one thing I wanted to tap on in the course of this conversation is this isn't just applicable if you're if you're in the creative
Yeah.
space, because
Right.
like parenting, hugely creative, running
Yeah.
a household, creative, a
Yes.
wellness program, creative. And there
Yeah.
is a process that actually can be translated to anything. So yes,
Sure.
please talk about
Okay.
sort of the high level stuff that you do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I mean, I thought it may be good to even get slightly into the weeds in that, just describing the steps. So when we are, when we come, we're contacted usually by a new client who's interested in getting something accomplished. They have some kind of opportunity, they want to engage people, and they reach out. So we usually start with a specific budget for developing a concept. So they commit to essentially a phase one where they are saying, we're going to pay you to think about this project and then come back and propose something like 3 opportunities. And so we don't start the creative process until we're actually already engaged with a client.
amen. For all you startup
Yeah,
entrepreneurs, and you're thinking, I just have to share my ideas. And
right.
if they like them, I'll be engaged. No, you're valuable, and your
Yes.
time is worthy of being paid.
Yes. So it's really important, even if it's a $500 budget or if it's a $50,000 budget, it's really important to have that first phase paid, right? So
Right.
that, they may be paying you $50,000 to develop a concept, or they may be paying you $500 to develop a concept, but whatever that is, you get to allocate that specific amount of time that will allow you to develop it. So if,
Now, but I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I also want to
yeah,
take note. You do a lot of what's the word? Nonprofit work
I
or
do,
volunteer. Yeah. So
I do.
in your, in your business, I just want to say that you allocate, because it is your values to allocate a tremendous amount of time and talent where you donate your time. So
Yes, we donate
yes.
our time, and we also create projects that are self-funded.
Okay, so that's important to know that that's
Yes,
in the fabric of what you do.
it
It's
is.
not
It
just
is.
paid clients. Yeah.
Yeah. But when it comes to new client, I want people to understand that the creative process, which is usually, it's like the important part, right?
Right.
Is a paid step. And I think that's something that some people entering the creative field may not think about.
Right.
So then we have come to the place where we propose perhaps 3 directions. Generally, seems to be something like that. We have a conversation with the client about what is best achieves those goals, and we pick a direction. And then from that, we really start to develop a project. So, and the development of the project is really like where it's still very creative, but the bulk of that creative process often does come at the front end, where you're, kind of deciding what something should be, what are the opportunities. So that for us is usually about 3 to 5 weeks of a process. And, it's a specific budget constraint and a specific location and a specific, the way that we work, it's, though often things look like an art installation, I was saying before, it's really from the model of what we do is more like an architecture firm, in that we, are looking at it as a process of problem solving, if that makes sense.
It does.
That we're looking at like what needs to be accomplished, what kind of engagement are we looking for, and what are the tools at hand to do that. And often it's something that's like an art experience, but it's for a specific purpose. So we really start every project with a story and a purpose.
Ooh,
And
that's so interesting. Let's just pause there.
yeah,
Every project is started with a story and a purpose.
yeah,
That's interesting to me. And maybe you can take an example. I don't know if it's the digital voyage or even the conversation.
yeah,
I'm just highlighting.
yeah.
Maybe you can
So I
walk us
mean,
through one example.
yeah. So if we were to talk about Visual Voyage, that what, the problem that we were given there is that when a cruise ship is being boarded, it's about a 4-hour process, and people often arrive at the terminal sometimes hours before then. So a terminal is filled with up to 1,000 people waiting to board a ship for
Wow.
multiple hours at a time.
Wow.
So it's this weird situation where you have a huge group of people and they have nothing to do. And they were interested in creating an art experience that was interactive. And everything that we knew about interactivity up until that point was hands-on, was gestural, where you're standing right up against it, or was, touch screen. Touch screen on your iPad, all those direct touch interactivity. So we thought, okay, what is the story here? And the story for us was about the kind of wanderlust of travel, and the kind of opportunity of the kind of freedom that boats have, that they're not tied to any specific country per se. You're sort of free from those kind of political ties, and you get to explore the world on this big ship that is like its own universe. You get to cross international date lines, you get to cross between hours of the clock, and there's this sort of like global freedom. So that was the sort of founding story, is about that. And then the challenge was, how do you create something that's engaging for 1,000 people that's
Right.
not touch interactive or gesture?
Right.
So we're like, okay, so here we have the problem and here we have the story. And and also, and the problem speaks to the purpose, right? And so that's right. So the purpose of this is to engage, and also inspire about this sort of the joy of the journey.
And get excited and not annoyed that you're sitting there for 6 hours waiting to get on your ship.
Right.
Yeah.
So we designed this installation that was a band of the globe along the equator. And so that, and we divided it into 24 segments, and each segment represented 1 hour of like the global clock. And we eventually essentially developed the technology for users to be able to, on their own devices, control a beam of light, a shaft of light, to go from along each segment of the 24-hour clock. So you could send the light, like the sun's light, east or west by just clicking buttons.
Friends, these are huge panels that are made of steel that have little holes inside them, that sort of form what typically looks like a giant flat globe, and the light behind it, so it illuminates. It is absolutely stunning.
You'll see video later.
Stunning. You'll see it in the video in the reel. It's called Visual Voyage, and it's gorgeous.
Yeah. So thanks, Alexa. So you can send the light, along those 24-hour clock bands, and you can send it east or west. But you have other people in the terminal who can also simultaneously be sending that light east or west. So it may actually require you to talk to people around you and get them to send it the same direction you want to send it. So you might actually have to engage with other people and kind of create a game that creates a group in your area to get the light to go all the way to one end or the other. Because when it hits the international date line, you get a light show across the whole wall.
Oh, so, and I also love that it meets people in different ways, meaning that you can choose, like in life, to engage, make some new friends, like really be entertained out of, use your phone. Like you might find delight in a deeper experience, but you are also getting an experience, because it's so gorgeous, just by walking in, and you have no interest in engaging it, but you're still being affected.
So it has both a passive and an active component, for sure.
I love that. I absolutely love that. It's so cool. It's so cool. Your work is amazing.
Oh,
and I actually remember you had come for a visit right when you had this proposal, and you were like, Like, what should I
Yeah.
do? And I also want to say that sometimes when we get big opportunities, we can get a bit nervous, right? You
Yeah.
weren't nervous, but I'm just saying in general, when
Yeah.
you have
Sure.
big ideas, even my 1 million people wishing at once,
Yeah.
there's a little bit like, oh, it's exciting, right? Oh,
Yeah.
yay. And then there's this other part of me that's like, this is such a big idea. I have
Yeah.
no idea. Like, oh my gosh, Alexa, here you are again doing such a big idea. I have no idea how I'm going to do this.
Yes.
What if I tell all these people that I see this thing and it's a million people wishing at once and it doesn't happen? That'll be so embarrassing. What, all that stuff.
Sure.
But
All that talk.
right. I have a free course over on alexafisher.com called Swimming Through Fear. And
Mm,
it's this intersection, like an arrow pointing forward, something that excites you and scares you is
yeah.
totally the direction you want to go. Because
Right.
if you're not being scared and challenged a little bit, you are not growing. It will be boring
Yes.
for you. If we
Yes.
just did what was like, if you just created things that were in your wheelhouse and you were
Yeah.
kind of regurgitating it because you're like, oh, I totally got this. I know the
Yep.
fabricator. I know that we could do this all day, every day.
Mm,
Beautiful installation. You would be so bored.
right. Right.
But the creative process and the excitement of doing what you do, and the same for me. The reason why I build companies and build
Yep.
ideas is because I love the process.
Yeah.
And if it scares me a little bit and
Yeah.
excites me, that's my indication.
Right.
Wow, this
Right.
is going to be fun.
Yeah.
This is going to be
Yeah.
a challenge. I am going to grow. It
Right.
won't always be easy, but I'm going to grow.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, I'm
So
going to
I want to
grow.
bring it back to your question, and how did our process differ from the process that we're usually in, in the design work that we do?
Yeah.
So, for Visual Voyage, I had, I think it was about 3 weeks to develop a concept. And
It's crazy.
I know, right? And then I flew down and presented it to a panel of architects and, everybody involved in that project. I was in a series of people because it was a competition. So you go in, you don't get to see anybody else or chat with anybody else. You go in, you're like on stage, you present your idea, you walk out and you leave and you go back to the airport and there's no engagement at all. So it was like kind of terrifying. But they ended up selecting the work, which, was great. And it was actually the launch of our studio. That was our first big project. And, I just would say that like as you were saying, that sort of like, it should scare you a little bit because that's going to be pushing you forward to be thinking bigger and, wilder ideas. I think that, I look at the self that I was at that time and, probably when I came and saw you in LA, just like bewildered of like, how do I have this opportunity to propose a project for this really big thing? How do I go about it? And now being 4 years on the other side of such a regular design process, I have such a different perspective.
Right.
Those kinds of opportunities come and I go, okay,
Great.
I know how to go about that. And, I engage in the process of like the steps. And I don't now tend to look at the end. I tend now to look at the next step. And
you prioritize the process.
yes.
And that is not the norm in a culture obsessed with outcomes.
Yeah.
We are so attached to the outcome that we often don't take the first step.
Right.
Because we're like, well, I'll waste my time, I'll waste my money. People are crazy. It's not going to be worth it. What are people going to say? Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And what I welcome, one of the outcomes for me in engaging with you on the next level of the project that we're developing is to put this creative process as a norm, as putting this idea of beginning with your hopes and dreams and wishes as a guiding process in your life to stay connected to your own unique experience and your gifts and putting your gifts out into the world.
Yeah.
Because the culture that we've sort of fallen into, which we've now been made to believe that is the way life is just the way it is because it's just a bunch of people doing it that way. That doesn't mean that that's the way it is.
Yeah.
It's just this the story we're all living.
And I'll bring it back to your question of how has this process been different?
Yeah.
Because that is, for me to be able to take time to really gestate an idea and really look at it from every angle and say, let's look at it like this for a while, and then take a step back and change our position and look at it from a different perspective for a little while.
Yep.
That has been transformative. It has been a really unique experience for me as a designer to have that kind of freedom where you don't yet have the constraints of a budget. You don't yet have the constraints of a client's, needs and wants, and, the kind of, the
Delicious
problem.
demands.
You don't yet have the problems, right?
Yeah.
And problems are what we design toward. So in a way, without those constraints, it's harder to design in a bubble of total freedom, because as a designer, you tend to say, okay, here is the solution to that part, and here's the solution, and here's the solution to all these little parts and pieces, and it ends up looking like this.
Right.
When you're designing in a totally, like, in a bubble of freedom, then what are you pushing up against?
Right. And how do you have the discipline to start making some decisions? And this is where I want to talk about intuition.
Yeah.
Because we took a step where we spent literally 6 months just having virtual calls. Then we told, just in a practical sense, to tell people what happened. Then we said, let's make time till we need, like, at least, I think we even only took like 2.5, 3 days together in real life, in person. We went to another city. So we were not in our rhythm of our regular work and family lives. We took that time to not go on vacation, although we did have fun, but we really brought whiteboards, and we just gave ourselves some in-person time. Hugely important. Note that at the end of even that first in-person retreat, we had still not committed 100% to making this happen. It was still the commitment to figure out what this is. So there's a constraint there that is worth noting.
Yeah.
That it wasn't like, let's do this. And then that feeling of mixed emotions. Am I ready? No, it was very healthy boundary. Then when we took a little bit more time, we made another 2 months later in-person time, which we did in your neck of the woods. And it was only then that something dropped in that was like, all right, now I see it. Let's do this. Like, we just had this moment, energy got really big. But this is where that intuition piece came, is that if you are someone who embraces the process of creativity in a way, you are also exercising a muscle of intuition and connectivity, because creativity is like listening for the whisper of intuition. Creativity doesn't come because you jam it out in your head or you focus with strain. It's like you have to find what's right for you, whether it's meditation or being in nature or looking at your life, reflecting on your life in a meaningful way, getting to know yourself, taking new classes. This is, in my opinion, how you develop intuition. It's just a commitment to a greater level of self-awareness.
Yeah.
So you get to know your own way. So that at a certain point, when we decided to, like, then the ideas were forming, and we took it from like this nebulous thing to like, okay, let's build a presentation deck. We didn't say it's for an investor. It was like, because we need to have a place where our ideas are captured and refined. I have never in my life worked on a deck more than I worked on this deck with you, which we're still working on.
Yep.
Because the etiquette and the commitment to be so clear with our ideas, that was the physical of the ideas that flowed up here.
Yeah.
And I think that as the creative process, the necessity to say, I am going to make choices, we are going to bring them in the physical, that's actually how they become, quote unquote, real.
Right. And that, it touches a little bit back on what I was saying in terms of like the idea in your head of the way something is. It's like this shiny, perfect object. And then they're bringing it, even just bringing it to a page where there's text next to it, where there's an image that represents it, where there's other images that together are meaningful. That's a kind of solidification of an idea that makes it real and different than the shiny object in your head. And just that process really helps to to make it real.
To make it real. And for you to say like, okay, I can see this. And what happened was we challenged ourselves. We put a deadline on our calendar, beginning of December. We arranged meetings. You came out here. We met with over a dozen people. It was all kind of formal, where we called them our inner circle meetings. And we walked through the presentation of this very, very big idea, which is it's bigger than just a million people wishing it once. And the sole purpose was to get feedback, was to see, and every single meeting, like you talk about the constellation, every single meeting that we had, we got a nugget of insight, a ray of like, oh, we hadn't thought about that. Oh, let's refine that. And so there is this, in a way, courage that you need to cultivate. You need to challenge yourself. Again, that intersection of exciting and scary in that, and flexibility, because had we presented it and been like, we figured it all out, everybody, like we are rigid, we are not going to change this. That wasn't the point.
Right.
The point was to refine and refine. We're still refining to a certain degree. We still have some refining. But what's amazing is that once it's there, it is like what I talk about, putting the pin in the map of your destiny. When you take the time, whatever time, commitment, energy, insight you need, you are literally telling the quote unquote universe, this is what we are ready to create. Like, thank you for the clarity, because now we have structure in a way that a client would give you of what is in alignment with that, what's not.
Right.
What, suddenly we have boundaries that are going to now keep us into phase 2, which is the execution of said idea. So creativity, design, concepting, what is my wish? What is our wish? How are we going to do this? Who does it involve? And then at a certain point, it shifts energy and it becomes about now, how do we actually practically make this happen? And then there's a lot of, and that unfolds a whole second chapter, which maybe in the interest of time, because where we are is still so much in the design, but we should do a part 2.
Okay.
When we're ready to talk about, okay, now you've had the download. Now you've noodled the idea. You've done your research. You've articulated it. You've, you all of that. And then there's the next phase. We'll do another podcast. We're like, okay.
I mean, I think it's such an interesting question, because we all are faced with that in the work that we do in the world of how do you bring the energy of the creative process through the execution phase?
Right. Because
and how do you keep it creative?
Muscle. Right. Now, just yesterday, I was meeting a friend of ours came over to the house, and he has this unbelievable idea. This is new for him. I mean, I think he's always been a freelancer, so he's an entrepreneur in many ways. But this is a really, 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 really big idea, and he's engaged with my husband a bit on it. And one thing I said to him, he was commenting that his spouse was kind of like a little bit like, come on, come on, come on, come on. That energy of like, when is this going to happen? Right? And I've done that to my husband, and he's done it to me maybe. So that's when I took the moment, even in just that moment, that said, you know what? Big ideas take time. So whether you just have to give yourself some space of grace to say, it's actually going to be time and perseverance and next steps and staying on task. But big ideas do take time. And when I have had a big idea, and you know this about me, because I have lots of ideas, I often think, oh, this class that I'm going to take, I'm not going to do this in like 3 weeks, but it takes time. And so sometimes there can be a habit of, well, if I'm going to give this a shake for 3 months, and if it doesn't work, well, then forget it. So where in life can you give yourself a break and slow it down and give yourself some space to imagine the idea, or have conversations, or give yourself a try, or save up some money, or do whatever you need to do, because we can set ourselves up for failure or to make the hill much steeper than it needs to be, simply because we have been ingrained in this immediate gratification society. It's truly a disservice.
I think there I would also add that it is so important to remember that the end result of a big idea isn't always big. That, that we can have wishes, and the beauty of watching them unfold may be something different. I mean, you say this all the time, but it really speaks to my experience that sometimes it ends up being a much smaller version of that.
Absolutely.
And
Whew.
there's like, that's beautiful too. And I think
Yeah,
that we need to be in the practice of allowing that to be success and
totally.
celebrating the culmination of these ideas that have come together and end up being a little flower, and that's
Yeah.
great too. And then you can like
Yeah.
move on to the next thing, and opposed to saying like, oh, that just died and was this lame thing. Like, no, that was the result.
Yeah.
And now
And I
you
have to
want to.
tell you, so going back to even this idea, a million people wishing at once. What
Yeah.
was it? 3 years ago when I was
Right.
like, you know what? I'm imagining that we're going to do a day of celebration and song and there's so many musicians that I love. Your husband and has this unbelievable band called the Durgas. And so I was like, you know what? I'm a believer that you have to do things, put the energy out into the world. So I ended up finding a bar in Los Angeles,
Yeah.
managed to book a date on a Sunday afternoon. We
Yeah.
booked the Durgas in there. My friend Julie Frost, who's an amazing award-winning songwriter, did
Yeah.
a piece. We live streamed it. And I have to tell you, like we had the bar full, it was a small bar.
Yeah.
And we put it on, I think like Facebook Live or Instagram Live, or I
Yeah.
don't even know what. And maybe like 10 people were watching.
Right.
And Vanessa, it could be so easy to say, well, that wasn't successful. How is that little event, even though it was an awesome concert, how is that little event going to be the seed, the one flower in this
Yeah.
garden of possibility? How is it connected? The point is, you never know.
You never know.
You never know. And I don't
Because
know.
also the energy that was in that room of 50 people or whatever it was, it's the same energy
It
when
is.
you have 50,000 people.
Yeah. Or
It's,
5,000
I
or
mean, it's a
5
different
million
scale, of
people.
course, but it's like
It's the same.
the energy is there.
Right.
And I think that it's so important to say also sometimes it's little ideas that grow and grow and grow
Yeah.
into giant ideas.
Yeah.
And
And you have to nourish those
that's
little
okay too.
ideas. Yeah.
Yeah.
And nourish those little ideas and with love and with care and keep them alive in the same way that you
Yeah.
tend to a little plant. You have to give it water and just the right amount of sun and pay
Yeah.
attention to it. And just because you're like, oh, damn, I didn't grow a forest. Like I only
Yeah.
wanted a forest. Well, it begins
Right.
with one little seedling at a time that you take
Yeah.
care of. And that's
Yeah.
how it begins. And I
Yeah.
think again, I wishes and I can get this way too when I look at my business and I think, oh my gosh, I have to like my marketing isn't working or my sales
Mm,
aren't where they are. And then I bumped into a woman the other day at the beach. My friend's sister showed up and she lives in a different city and she had a wish bead on. And
yeah.
she said to me, you're the one that makes wish beads. I love my bracelet. I practically wear it every day for the last 3 years. And I was just like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, there's
Yeah.
so many people. And in fact, it was my youngest son on Christmas morning turned to
Mm,
me and he said, I'm going to cry when I think about this. He said, do you know how many people are opening up wish beads today? And I was like, oh my God, that's so
oh,
cool. Because like so many people that I don't know, that I'm never going to know
yeah.
are like having a moment where they're like, oh,
Yeah.
I can connect to my hopes. I can,
Ugh,
oh, that's neat. And there's like a little like love bubble that may be coming. And so as a business owner, because there's so many practical details and
mm,
customer service and all the sort of mechanics of running a
totally.
business, it's so easy to get your head stuck in that lane and
Yeah.
not remember the magic.
Yeah.
And so wherever anybody is, whether you are, looking at your family life and
Yeah.
navigating a pandemic and online school, or you're navigating health challenges or grief or whatever, kind of real world, and they're very real world challenges, those moments of magic are not about when you obtain the thing. It's
Hmm.
about finding grace right now, nurturing the
Hmm.
now of with grace, the wow of now. And to me, that is exactly the fuel of that we're talking about, that
Yeah.
awe that I
Yeah.
love in your work, that's how we help in this time of great transition.
Right. Right.
That's where I think we are.
Yeah.
And you have to find your allies, your friends, your community that you may not have a good friend who happens to be brilliant that you can call and say, "Hey, I've got this big idea. Would you mind committing like a good decade of your more time of your life to it?" But you could probably find a friend who might, be there to have a call once a week just to say, "I
Yeah.
need to talk through something," or,
Yeah.
go for a walk together, or find those connective tissues that says, what I call like your wish buddy. Like, how can you
Yeah.
find that to give yourself the space to be creative with wherever you are in
Yeah.
your life?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes creativity, like we were saying earlier, is just connecting dots.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's that simple of just
Yeah.
seeing that the solution exists in front of you.
Right.
And there's a version of the thing that you're desiring to achieve there in front of you by pulling in
Yeah.
the dots that are already there and
Yeah.
just seeing them and believing that that's enough.
Yeah. And asking if you're in a place where you need help, even if you
Yeah.
ask silently, ask to
Yeah.
whatever source, unknown force that you believe in,
Mm-hmm.
and say, I'm ready, willing, and able to receive guidance on fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And then relax enough, open yourself up enough to pay attention, and it will
Yeah.
come.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that to me is that ongoing process of creativity, is that
Right.
ask and you receive, ask and you receive, ask the question, pay attention, be aware of yourself. And that's how you cultivate trust and connections, and you start to enjoy the process of
Yeah.
discovery,
And I think, yeah, exactly, that it's discovery, that the challenge is to keep your eyes open to see the connectivity, right?
Yeah.
And be able to see in which way is it already happening.
Yeah. And celebrate that. Give
Yeah.
yourself like a fist pump. Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels so good.
Yeah.
Be your best cheerleader.
Totally.
I
Totally.
literally could talk about this stuff with you for like a billion years. So I'm going to wrap this up
Okay.
because I think it's time. But I will say this, we are, if you watch and are listening to this, when this Wish Circle launch, I mean, not Wish Circle, when this podcast launches, you will know that on January 29th, Vanessa is actually our Wish Circle guest. So if you want to feel and be in the circle of creativity and connection and possibility, join us. A wish circle, if you're not familiar with that, is where we wish together online. I guide you through a visualization exercise where you're invited to see a moment where everything feels just right. But it's also an opportunity to come together in community. And after the visualization, I hold space to answer questions and actually talk about how you bring some of these visions in a very practical way into your life right now. So you recognize those moments, or you actually create some tangible experiences into your life right now that bring you and make you feel the joy right now, make you feel creatively like how you can get what you want in a way right now. And so we're going to wish together. So in the link, I will also do in the link in the show notes where you can sign up. It's free. It's on Zoom. It lasts an hour. We are going to be hosting it at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern time, and all the other time zones in between. You can calculate that. But I'm excited to continue to build these big, beautiful wishes with you, Vanessa.
I'm looking forward to wishing with you. I'll see you then.
All right, perfect. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And such a fun conversation. This will definitely be a part one.
Awesome. Love it. Thanks, Alexa. Talk again soon.
Yeah, we will. Thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, thank you for leaving a review, sharing with a friend, and making sure to subscribe. All of that makes a difference. And if you are ready to wish with us, by all means, join us for our upcoming Wish Circle. If you're catching this after we've done our one with Vanessa, no worries. I host Wish Circles typically at the end of every month. And each wish circle features a special guest. Also, if you have any of your own wish stories to share, please do so. Just email us at hello@wishbeads.com. And I would love to feature you and your story, perhaps on the podcast as well, because it's your stories, the truth of what you've experienced that's going to inspire others. So thank you. Believe in yourself, believe in your magic. You truly deserve to have your wishes come true. I'll see you next time.